Welcome to the SGPN Fantasy Football Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, brought to you by Shady Rays. Shady Rays is having their best deal of the year. Go to shadyrays.com and use code SGPN for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses and 3D Dynasty. Let us know what you think about the logo and the name. Welcome to the show. We got the NFL draft. Hope everyone is ready to go. We got day 3 going on. We have 3 rounds in the books, and so a lot of surprises. Brad, I think it's easiest if we just go starting with the round 1 recap and just go pick by pick so we don't miss anybody, because there's so much to go through. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there. So let's look at it. We got the draft tracker. And we're not going to start with round 4. So the first fantasy football relevant player was the first player off the board. I'll go through the top 4 picks. Bryce Young at 1, CJ Stroud at 2, Will Anderson at 3, Anthony Richardson at 4. So for Superflex, this is huge. We got 3 quarterbacks with very similar draft capital, with none of them are really pristine landing spots, and that's typical when your team is picking in the top 5. Brad, who'd you have as your 1 going in? Who is your 1 coming out? Now you're muted.
Hell, dude, my mic is just jacked up today for whatever reason. Bryce Young was my number 1 going in. He is still my number 1, assuming he was going to Carolina to begin with. I never really believed in all the chatter around CJ Stroud being the top pick there. So I really like the landing spot. I like that they brought in a Jonathan Mingo later on in the draft. I think that's going to be helpful for Bryce Young. And Miles Sanders to kind of lean on. So I like the build that the Carolina Panthers have going. And I just think Bryce Young is head and shoulders above everybody else in this draft class.
Yeah, and we talked about it before the draft, is of how landing spot and everything is going to change things. And, and we talked specifically about Anthony Richardson. And for me, something that Matt said on the show the other day, Konami code quarterback and the instant, I do think you're going to get more fantasy production early if every single one of these guys plays right away. Anthony Richardson is going to give you that early. We saw it last year. Kenny Pickett, he was okay, but you can start Kenny Pickett for anything. And so, those rookie quarterbacks typically don't really do too much year 1. But the guys that like Patrick Mahomes didn't play year 1, he killed it, 50 touchdowns in his first year. That's not expected with any of these players. But I have to move Anthony Richardson up. The rushing upside is just too much. And even if I'm going to say that, Anthony Richardson's not going to play year 1, it's there. The one concern that I'll have, and, I don't play fantasy football by decade. Like in the next decade, this is going to happen. But, the quarterback's longevity is much longer than a running back, but a rushing quarterback does not have the same longevity as a pocket passer. And so somebody like Cam Newton is a great example. Feels like Cam Newton is, 40 years old, and this guy's 32, 31, but because of his play style did not have a long career. So that is something you need to consider with these rushing quarterbacks. So Bryce Young's your 1. Who is your 2?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with CJ Stroud at number 2. I still have my tiers, though, the way that they were pre-draft. I'm very big advocate of not making it a common occurrence to shift tiers around. So CJ Stroud is still my number 2. Ended up at Houston. They did add some weapons there. He's got a little security blanket in Dalton Schultz as well. And this might be one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate quarterback out of the class. There was some concerns around his athleticism that I think he put to bed in that Georgia in the Georgia Bowl game, and it's just going to continue to move forward there with the Houston Texans. I love everything that they did in this draft, being able to move back up and get Will Anderson with this 3rd overall pick that we probably won't talk about because, unless you're in IDP leagues, we're going to leave that to our counterparts with the SGPN Fantasy Football Network. But I think it's a good core to start to build your team around. You got John Mechie coming back, hopefully healthy. And they added a little bit in the draft as well at the wide receiver position. So Stroud is still my number 2.
Yeah, and for me, you know how I do my rankings. I'm looking at player value, and I think that the consensus has made a swing that Anthony Richardson is the more valuable player at this point. And people they love that rushing upside, and it does offer a safe floor for these younger players. You look at Jalen Hurts, he threw 16 touchdowns 2 years ago, was the quarterback 8 on the year, didn't even start the whole season. Then you have Justin Fields last year. He had I don't know how many touchdowns he threw, but it was not a lot, and he had a good fantasy season. Daniel Jones only threw 15 touchdowns last year. He was a top 10 quarterback. So rushing is just a cheat code, and unless you play in a league that's got some scoring that helps, reduce it, I have to go with Anthony Richardson at 1 at this point. And I just love Shane Steichen, and we've talked about this, Brad. And if you get someone like Shane Steichen there, I think that the team will build around him, similar to how the Ravens built around Lamar Jackson. And they can do that here in this draft as well as in the next few seasons by building a team that is going to build around his strengths. And one of the things they did was they grabbed Josh Downs, huge playmaker, and I absolutely love that pick to go with Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and Isaiah McKenzie. So I'm a big fan of what they're doing. They also got Jonathan Taylor there. So, I mean, you try Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson coming out of the backfield with some RPOs and some other stuff. It's going to be a handful for the defenses. So I'm going to go with Bryce Young at 2, CJ Stroud at 3. And I definitely I don't want to forget to talk about Shady Rays. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered from the sun to the slopes with premium polarized shades, customizable snow goggles, and much more. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers a world-class product that is just as good as any expensive pair we've worn. Durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. That's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection of all eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed with lost and broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair, even on day 1, they told us they will send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back a long way after the purchase. With Shady Rays, you can look good and feel good too. To date, they have donated over 20 million meals to fight hunger and feeding America. If you don't love them, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free for 30 days, no risk when you shop at Shady Rays. Their team always has your back. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving away their best deal of the year. Go to shadyrays.com and use promo code SGPN for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5+ stars by 200,000 people. So, Brad, the next one, I was pretty shocked by this. You weren't. You thought this was probably late in the draft here at the 8th spot. Bijan Robinson goes to the Atlanta Falcons. And I saw some people out there saying this is a bad landing spot. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, who's he competing with? Look, I get it. Tyler Algier looked good. You don't pick Bijan Robinson at number 8 overall and be like, you know what? We're gonna have like a 60-40 split with Tyler Algier, our 5th round, 6th round pick from last season. Like, get out of here with that. Stop freaking out. Just look at what the Atlanta Falcons are doing on the ground. If you look, they were one of the top rushing teams in the NFL through the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season last year with Marcus Mariota at the helm, running, with Cordero Patterson and Caleb Huntley and Tyler Algier, and now you put a legitimate threat in the backfield. I just think he's going to eat. He has that pass catching ability as well. There's nobody there that is going to actually challenge him. This is a guy that I believe you can see Najee Harris type of load from Najee Harris's rookie season, where it's almost 400 opportunities between rushing the ball and pass targets or pass catching targets. So I think this is an absolute smash location for him. They're going to build around him. It seems like they might be pretty happy with at least what they saw from a developmental perspective over those last 3 games with Desmond Ridder. You got Drake London another year in. You got Kyle Pitts another year in, adding to the offensive line. I just think this team is going to start to improve, and Bijan is going to be the backbone of that offense.
Yeah, and the person said I can list 20 teams that are better, and I was like, let me see the list, because there's not. Is it, did he go to one of the top 5 power offenses in the league? No. But what he did go to is a team that rushed the ball the most in the NFL last year. They had the 3rd most rushing yards in the league last year. And this is a team that has a good offensive line and a head coach that, as an offensive coordinator, used a workhorse approach when he was in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. And Bijan Robinson is that kind of guy. And there's just not a lot of places out there that are going to offer that opportunity of being a workhorse. I said 20 teams. Give me half the league that actually gives 70% or more to one running back. It's probably like 5 or 6 teams that actually do that. So Bijan going there, I thought, was a great landing spot. And for him, it's good draft capital. I mean, not only is he getting paid, he gets the 5-year option. So I think it's going to be a fun offense there with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and now Bijan Robinson. And soon after, so on the Sports Gambling Podcast live draft show, they said, give me a hot take. And I was like, I'm not a hot take guy because I couldn't think of anything on the spot. And then I said, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get drafted over Bijan Robinson. And they were like, whoa, you're not a hot take guy. And I was almost there. The Lions were thinking about Jahmyr Gibbs at the 6th spot. It would have been it was a Dave Gettleman kind of a first round for them, running back and offensive and an outside linebacker. But they did trade and get an additional pick, I believe, 1st round pick to go with those. But Jahmyr Gibbs goes to 12. This was the shock of the draft. We fully expect to see DeAndre Swift possibly traded today. And that would be great for Jahmyr Gibbs, and it would definitely be great for David Montgomery. But what are your thoughts here about Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions?
I was one angry dude last night, or on Friday night, Thursday night, because of that. As soon as this happened, I'm a believer in DeAndre Swift. I see a similar player, a little bit smaller. What are you doing? What are you doing? You drafted DeAndre Swift early in the 2nd round. You just signed David Montgomery to a 3-year deal. Now you spend a high 1st round pick from over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. This is an extremely high. Gibbs going over where Najee Harris went, where Breece Hall went, where Javonte Williams went, Najee Harris, like any of those guys. What are you doing? Your defense is pathetic. And you passed over a ton of defensive players for another running back. It does not make sense to me from a team build perspective. It doesn't make sense to me from a play calling perspective. Like, what are you doing? So unless they know they have a suitor who's willing to give what they want for DeAndre Swift, this move makes 0 sense to me. I hated it. I still hate it. When DeAndre Swift moves, I'm sure I'll love it. But right now I'm still in shock and awe. So
yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm the guy that says don't draft a running back in the top 20 picks. But here's where I'll say for Lions fans, this is the deal. You didn't take him at 6, would have been awful. You moved down to 12 with the Cardinals, and you got pick 34, which that definitely is essentially another 1st round pick. It's a very high 2nd, and you got Jahmyr Gibbs plus that. They possibly would have tried to move back even further, but there's not a guarantee that they would have landed Gibbs, and there's not a guarantee that they had a trade partner that was willing to trade up. Yes, I agree. I would have looked at the cornerback position, and I would have looked at some of the other positions because at 12, with three quarterbacks going so early, you still had a top 10 player on your board available, and you chose to go with running back. And then, you got pick 34, plus you're going to get some compensation for DeAndre Swift. I fully expect that Swift is going to demand a trade, and the Lions could get maybe a fifth round pick, sixth round pick. Maybe they get a pick this year, pick next year for DeAndre Swift. And I said it on my short. DeAndre Swift was absolutely a loser day one, but I think day three he can become a winner. And I think all of us that have had DeAndre Swift and are frustrated like Brad would love to see him go somewhere where he can be free, whether it's going to, the Bengals, Miami, Kansas City, Philadelphia, somewhere where he can thrive, because this guy is just he's definitely not in good graces with the head coaching staff based on the way he's been treated over the last couple of years. Brad, before I go to the next picks, can you let us know a little bit about our friends over there, Underdog Fantasy?
Absolutely. We are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and the NBA and NHL playoffs are here. And what better way to get down on some player prop parlays than over at Underdog Fantasy? Besides the daily NHL, NBA, and MLB games, they've also already got their NFL best ball drafts with a guaranteed $500,000 in prizes. So head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use our promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. Again, that's UnderdogFantasy.com. Promo code SGPN.
Yeah, and then so the next we had was a while. We didn't see another offensive
wide receiver
player
run. Yep.
until another offensive fantasy football relevant position until we saw the wide receiver run, and it was fun because again, you want to argue draft capital with the quarterbacks. Not a huge difference between 1, 2, and 4. We got 20, 21, 22, 23. 4 literally in a row. The Giants missed out on getting a receiver round 1. What are your thoughts here? Is Jackson Smith and Jigba still your wide receiver 1?
No, and I'd flip-flop back and forth between JSN and Jordan Addison, but just seeing what the Seahawks are doing is a very weird situation for me, right? Not only did they draft JSN, and I know Tyler Lockett's getting up in age and whatnot, and they've got DK Metcalf, but then they turn around and they take Zach Charbonnet in the second to pair with Kenneth Walker. There really is the team trying to run, or is the team trying to throw? Are they trying to do 50-50? Like, either of those situations, I don't like. And I just don't know that there's going to be the volume the way that Pete Carroll typically runs his offense. And now you add another dynamic back like Zach Charbonnet and you bring in JSN. I just don't think the upside is there with him in year 1, hell, even year 2, to be quite frank. So, and then now you're running into Geno Smith contract timing and new quarterback and all that. So I'm not out on JSN, but because I had him and Addison in the same tier, I'm flip-flopping because Jordan Addison is the number 2 in that offense. I know they've got TJ Hawkinson, but even as good as TJ Hawkinson was in his after the trade to the Minnesota Vikings, it wasn't that target hog getting 100+ targets for the Minnesota Vikings when you add a guy like Jordan Addison. He's got the skill set. He's got the route running chops, which really looks like what Kevin O'Connell wants, right? When you think about what they've got in Justin Jefferson, and now they add a Jordan Addison. So I've currently got Jordan Addison at number 1 and JSN number 2 now.
Yeah, and year 1 until recently, wide receivers weren't really doing too much as far as fantasy football. Recently, we've been very spoiled, and our bar is now much higher than what it used to be. And so we're expecting guys to go out and do what Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave did, what Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase did. And I just don't know if I have expectations for anybody in this class because I don't think there is a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb in this class. I think there's a lot of wide receiver twos with maybe potential to develop into a one with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Year one, you're not going to see a whole lot of production. Not only with the running backs and them focused on running the ball, which that's not really a new thing for Seattle. They had Marshawn Lynch, Chris Carson. They've always ran the ball a lot. You go back to Pete Carroll's days in USC, they ran the ball, a lot of play action.
Whew, got a little quarterback run going on right now.
I see that. I see that.
Attention. Stetson Bennett going off in the 4th round. What is happening?
Jake Hayner went before Stetson Bennett.
Yep.
So I'll say this: be patient with JSN. If you're drafting him to, as a championship piece, that's not gonna work out the way you want it to. But if you're drafting him for the long run, Tyler Lockett is 32, 33 years old. I would not be surprised if the team moved on from Tyler Lockett as soon as next year. And you could see a situation just like you have with Jordan Addison, where Adam Thielen's out of town. JSN's instantly the number 1 or number 2 on that offense. Obviously, DK Metcalf is there. But DK Metcalf, he has – Tyler Lockett's typically gotten, his fair share of targets when he's there. Then you got Quentin Johnston going to a pristine landing spot, but he's another guy where you're going to have to wait a little bit. You have Keenan Allen there. Mike Williams is there. So both those top 2 guys go in, and they're the third option. Then you have Zay Flowers going to the Ravens, another one that could be the third option. You got Rashad Bateman. You have Mark Andrews. They're I don't even know what's going on with Antonio Brown. They have the DeAndre Hopkins conversation. Flowers could be the 2. I could see him overtaking Bateman. And if he operates in the slot, I like him for fantasy this year. And you look at Lamar Jackson's heat map, he does a lot better with those inside routes and throwing to the middle of the field. Jordan Addison with Minnesota. Can you talk about that for a second, Brad?
Yeah, I love that landing spot with Jordan Addison. I talked about it a little bit earlier. You've got a route running savant, quite possibly one of the best ones, if not the best route runner out of the group, going to me, a premier landing spot where they've got just on one side. Now you can put Jordan Addison either in the slot or outside and operate, and he's going to win at all levels. He's a guy that can win underneath, guy that can win over the top, even though he doesn't have that blazing speed or anything like that. But what we've seen out of Kevin O'Connell's offense, Justin Jefferson is really able to stretch the field a little bit. He's getting those over the top runs. And Jordan Addison can really eat underneath with TJ Hawkinson going down the seam. I think it's a really good combination for the 3 of them. Kirk Cousins, we know, is very capable of carrying 2 wide receivers. So I think it's like I said, a premier landing spot, and I'm pretty excited about Jordan Addison. I will add one thing that's interesting around Quentin Johnston, and that's just the Chargers in general, right? In the 4th round, they just took his teammate from TCU. And if you look at now we can start to tie some of these things together a little bit. You got Kellen Moore, who spent his last few seasons in Dallas, in Texas, near TCU, where maybe he got to see some of these guys play real time and a little bit more of a scouting viewpoint from him. He comes in as the offensive coordinator for the Chargers and then adds Quentin Johnston and adds really the speedster in that TCU offense in Darius Davis, who ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. So very interesting what Kellen Moore is doing as the OC there.
Yeah, and they got Josh Palmer there still as well, and Gerald Everett. So, I think Justin Herbert was a big winner with what they've done so far. And as long as Austin Eckler's still on the team, that's a pretty loaded offense. And I'm a bigger Kellen Moore fan than some people.
DeAndre Swift just got traded to the Eagles.
Another Bulldog. The Philadelphia Bulldogs is trending, and that's insane.
Oh God, I'm so happy now.
I told you,
man.
I hate it as a Giants fan. That is ugh. I haven't even gotten the news yet. So that's breaking news. And so DeAndre Swift going to the Eagles is just the rich get richer. And again, it's just funny because they're just Like they're picking Bulldogs as a joke at this point. But they just literally traded for one, and I'm sure that Rich Eisen's gonna have fun with it.
Yeah, right.
Um, yeah, so I've been like 1A, 1B with Addison and JSN, and I think people are still going to be higher on JSN. They're going to stick to their takes, but I do think some people are going to look at Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison and think about them as the number ones because of they're being tied, not only the opportunity for Addison, but the being tied to Justin Herbert for Quentin Johnston. And some people had Johnston as their 2 or 3 already. Dalton Kincaid was the number one tight end off the board. And the Bills were in the market, just like the Giants for receivers, but they didn't make any trades up. And they got Dalton Kincaid, who's essentially a slot. And so you could see some more 12 personnel out of Buffalo. But you're going to see Dalton Kincaid lined up in the slot outside of the formation quite a bit. The way they use him, the way they're going to use him is not going to be like your traditional tight end. And they shouldn't. You shouldn't, like Kyle Pitts. You shouldn't take Kyle Pitts and say, I want you to be an inline blocker. Dalton Kincaid is not as good of a run blocker as Dawson Knox is, and he's going to have to develop that part of his game. But he is a much better receiving option than Dawson Knox, and he's going to go out there and add really what we talked about is a missing piece for Josh Allen. And I would not be shocked if he competes with Gabriel Davis for number 2 in targets. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Buffalo Bills didn't add another receiver. I love what they did. No offensive linemen aren't on your fantasy team, but I was happy to see them get Osiris Torrance. That's a huge fill for that offensive line. Josh Allen was running for his life that last game of the season, and he couldn't find a receiver because he was running for his life and getting sacked so much. And I think they had to address that offensive line to be able to help the other pieces of that offense. And James Cook is surviving so far. I was really thinking some of these other players that are still on the board could still go there, but he's dodged the first 8 or 9 running back bullets.
Another Georgia Bulldog.
Another Georgia Bulldog. And so let's go.
Look, I haven't been a Kincaid hater, but I've had Mayer over him the entire pre-draft process just because of the full 3-down skill set. I will say there were 2 landing spots where I said I will jump Kincaid over Michael Mayer. One was the Dallas Cowboys, which we'll get to who they drafted here in the second round. And then the other one was the Buffalo Bills. And it's because he is, to me, the clear number 2. Gabriel Davis, they don't give him the volume to be a number 2. I think Dalton Kincaid is going to step in immediately, and he's going to be that guy. So he's got to be the tight end 1 for everybody at this point. And I don't know that it's really a question.
Yeah, and Gabriel Davis really struggled to stay healthy. So you got Will Levis that fell hard. And he left town, didn't have to wait too long, second round to be picked, but he still was not there for it. A little disappointment for Will Levis stands as well as Will Levis himself, but he gets a pretty good landing spot to potentially, to compete with Malik Willis for the Titans quarterback, position next year. What are your thoughts on Will Levis going here? Does it drop him out of your first round?
Most likely, yeah. I think him and Hooker both just with the draft capital, even though they got landing spots that we really liked, we were kind of hoping those landing spots were going to be earlier in the draft, right? We talked about that first round draft capital. If they got that, how we'd be moving him and Hooker up. But with the fall in Will Levis, I do think it's beneficial for him, right? There's a lot of criticism around the growth that he needs to take. I think it might humble him a little bit, which is also needed because he does have a tad bit of arrogance to him as well. So that might put him in check a little bit. But being able to go and play behind a quarterback that they don't need to feel rushed to get him in. And if you go back to our Will Levis pre-draft review back in February, I comped him to Ryan Tannehill. He's a very similar quarterback, has those legs. So I think the transition will be pretty fluid for him, and being able to just sit and watch that offense a little bit, see how he operates, and be able to learn for a year before he needs to come in is really good for him. So he does drop out of the first round of rookie drafts for me. to really the top end of the second round, I can't justify spending a first on him right now. But
Yeah, there's just not a lot of examples of second round quarterbacks that pan out. I know, Andy Dalton, Jalen Hurts, and Derek Carr, but Jalen Hurts has been the only one that's really been a top fantasy producer. Derek Carr and Andy Dalton have been kind of like your baseline for average. Cool kids call it mid. So the trade terms: the Eagles get DeAndre Swift and a 7th round pick 249, for a 4th round pick in 2025 and a 7th round pick 219. So they move back 30 spots in the 7th round and give a 4th round pick for DeAndre Swift. Essentially get him for free and the rest of the NFL. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing to allow that to happen? I'm as a Giants
I would be curious how big of a, I mean, the Eagles already had to have had really good Super Bowl odds prior to the draft, but now post-draft, walking away with Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter, and now adding DeAndre Swift, they added a wide receiver. Like, how are they not just, I mean, it's got to be a huge gap between them and the Kansas City Chiefs for a Super Bowl this year now. Like, absolutely nuts.
They have to if they can keep all these guys and big personalities in check. There's a lot of off the field stuff with Jalen Carter and Keely Ringo but if they can keep that in check and DeAndre Swift stays healthy, this is going to be a pretty nasty team. And Rashad Penny's he's a good running back when he's healthy. So him and Swift's a pretty nasty tandem. So. Then you had Sam Laporta and Michael Mayer right there back to back in the second round. And second round draft capital for a tight end is good draft capital. It's not the same thing for a quarterback, but it is a good thing for tight ends. And this is 3 tight ends earlier than we saw any tight end last year's class. So what are your thoughts about Laporta going to the Lions?
I like the landing spot for Laporta, but I go back to questioning, like, Detroit, what are you doing? Well, it doesn't. You had TJ Hawkinson. You traded him away just to turn around and draft Sam Laporta in the second round the following year. Like, I'm
going to make it make sense. I'm going to make it make sense for you. So it's all about money. And TJ Hawkinson cost a lot. How much did TJ Hawkinson get paid?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, he was a first round pick, so he was still on his rookie deal. They didn't give him an extension, did they?
Yeah, he got an extension. So,
did he get an extension there?
He's going to have to get paid at some point, but I'm pretty sure he already got extended.
Right.
And that's why you make that move.
Yeah. He did. Yeah.
That's why you make that move.
They didn't pay him that much. 4-year, $19 million.
That was Detroit. That's his rookie contract.
Right. That's what I'm saying. He didn't get paid again. He has not been paid again yet.
Well, he's about to, and so he's on his contract. So 4-year, $19 million. That's not what he's going to get paid. He's going to get $12 million a year,
probably.
And that's why you make that move. If you're looking at all these receivers, you're going to have to Jared Goff. You're going to have to make a decision to make. That they had the most expensive offensive line going into the season last year. Not offensive line, offense going into last year.
And did they make the playoffs with the most expensive?
I mean, they almost
all
did.
Playmakers. They almost did, but they didn't because their defense is terrible. Like, well, what are you doing?
I mean, I got you. But the reason that guys make these moves is money is a lot of times, and if you're not wanting to pay the tight end position a lot of money, you're going to have to make a trade. And they got multiple players, not just one player. It wasn't Sam Laporta for TJ Hawkinson. So I think that's being lost in this little argument.
For Laporta, it's good, right? When you look at the opportunity he's going to have there, especially with Jameson Williams now out for the first 6 games because of gambling on college games, which is very odd that now gets you suspended or gets you suspended, period. But we won't get into that. he's going to step into a role in that offense. We saw how TJ Hawkinson could produce there. I think you're going to see a very similar thing with Sam Laporta. The dude's got probably the best hands out of the tight ends in general out of this class. So I think it's a pretty good landing spot from a fantasy perspective for Sam Laporta. And you've got a guy in Jared Goff who's not afraid to just sling it, so it's not necessarily what Dan Campbell does. So maybe the volume is not quite there that you would look for, but we've always talked about tight ends not being somebody that you look at producing in year one or really even year two. It's year three and beyond.
Yeah, and so I like the move, and I think for Laporta, he's another guy that you really got to project. This is an Iowa offense that was awful, and so he's another guy that he does have that 3-down skill set, and let's be honest, like Kincaid's going to be on the field. He's not going to be taken off on third downs. But as far as Laporta and Mayer, they are better blockers, and you hope that doesn't hurt them, that they're on the field for 90% of the time, but they're only running 50 routes a game. You have Michael Mayer goes to Dallas. What do you think about him going to the Cowboys?
He went to Raiders, right? Shoemaker went to
Raiders. Raiders. That was my mock draft. Went to the Raiders.
It's an opening, right? I mean, they've got Devontae Adams. They've got Hunter Renfrow. I think it's a good landing spot for him. A vacated Darren Waller with quite a few targets in the games that he played. Now, he is totally a different type of player than what they had in Darren Waller. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how Josh McDaniels utilizes him versus kind of the game plan when they had a Darren Waller. And if you think about what, his experience was in New England, it was that bigger, more athletic type of tight end. And I'm not going to relate him to Gronkowski or anything like that, but it's going to be interesting to see what Josh McDaniels does with Michael Mayer. This is another one of those situations, like you said, with Dalton Kincaid, like, hey, look, he's not a great blocker, but he's probably not going to come off on third down because he's so explosive. Michael Mayer is not going to come off the field. He's going to play 90+% of snaps most likely. But the problem is exactly what you said. The route participation may not be that great because when you look at what they did with Josh Jacobs last year, 300 plus carries, that's on the table again. What's the opportunity going to be there for him? Now, on the flip side of that, the nice thing is Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Jimmy Garoppolo has historically been known to target his tight ends. So I think that'll be beneficial for Michael Mayer. And it comes out as kind of a wash. He is still going to be my tight end 2 after the draft. And Sam Laporta is currently tight end 3 for me. So.
Yeah. And that's pretty much how it shakes out for me. I mean, I never was a big Washington guy. I think he's another guy that's not going to have a whole bunch of routes run, whole bunch of targets. But Washington's got that knee injury. That is definitely a concern. So let's go down the board a little bit. We had, more offensive weapons go. And Jonathan Mingo is a guy that we've been talking about on the show as a riser. And he ends up getting really good draft capital. He is the 5th receiver off the board. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. He goes to the Carolina Panthers with Bryce Young. What are your thoughts about Jonathan Mingo and how high has he moved up your board?
Yeah, he's moved quite a bit. And, after all the pre-draft hype around how, we think this guy might be a first or second rounder, I was working through our metric system and trying to get that lined out. And he actually came out as the 5th best wide receiver in the metric system and was drafted as the 5th wide receiver off the board. So it lined up pretty nice. The indicators are all there that he can be successful at the next level. When you look historically, both from an athletic profile and a production standpoint. And when I say production, that production doesn't mean he's gone out and put up 1,300 yard seasons. It's all about yards per route run, catch percentage, things like that. Those metrics that will translate over to the next level. And he really did look to cover all of those things while he was at Ole Miss. And he's going into a situation where really the competition is pretty open. You got Terrace Marshall there. You got Shi Smith there. You got Jonathan Mingo now. What does that wide receiver room look like? Who it turns out to be the alpha? And I think Jonathan Mingo, both profiles from a size perspective and from a production perspective, be able to be that alpha for CJ Stroud, for Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, with with Bryce Young, one of the concerns was, they patchwork together, an offense for him, and then the only one that really was under contract past this year was Miles Sanders, and then you trade away his best receiver in DJ Moore, so you get DJ Chark in there as a 1 year guy. You bring Jonathan Mingo, so you got your inside guy as far as Jonathan Mingo, your outside guy in Chark. You got Hayden Hurst, and then you got Adam Thielen. It's not a bad offense to start to start off his rookie year. And we expect Bryce Young to start pretty immediately. They have Andy Dalton there, and Dalton he might start a game or two, but I don't expect too much. I really expect them to get Bryce Young going pretty early, and we'll see. But Jonathan Mingo there, he operates out of the slot. He's a big possession receiver. He looks like an outside guy, but he plays in the inside, and then he's got blazing speed. He was the fastest player to track last year, almost 22 miles an hour. So we got another tight end off the board, Luke Musgrave. I know I've been a little higher on him than you have. With his landing spot and his draft capital, have you moved him up the board, or where do you got him?
I did for about a day. And then I watched Green Bay take Tucker Kraft in the third round. I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? So now there's questions for me as to, obviously, yeah, they spent the higher draft capital on Luke Musgrave. They're going to give him more the opportunity. But with less than 32 picks difference between these two folks, now it becomes a question of, okay, they're close enough that, let's say Tucker Kraft comes in and balls out during training camp, during rookie mini camp. They're not going to hesitate to put him in over Luke Musgrave, right? Luke Musgrave had some injury issues while he was in college. Is he going to be able to overcome those? So I was excited initially because he was going into a situation where, outside of Christian Watson, who is the number 2 target? Is it Romeo Doubs? Could it be Luke Musgrave? Yes, it could have been, but now with Tucker Kraft, it muddies the waters a little bit, and most likely I will not be drafting him in rookie drafts at all, to be quite frank. And maybe that's an over-exaggeration, but I'll let somebody else take that shot in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not taking him in the second round, but not drafting him at all. That's for me. It's that's too much of an overcorrection. Remember the Ravens? They drafted. You had Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews.
Yep.
And Mark Andrews ended up being the better player. And then in this scenario, you don't have a first round pick, but you have a pretty high second round pick. And I think this just tells you they're going to run more 12 personnel now with Aaron Rodgers out of there. They're going to run the ball a lot with Jordan Love and do a lot of that play action pass.
These guys are blockers, though.
Well, I mean, you're still gonna, when you have 12 personnel, it's not 6 or 8 linemen out there. It's usually one is blocking, one's going out, and so if you got Mercedes Lewis on one side and you got one of these guys on the other, plus you can play a little bit of this slot receivers. You have Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and with what they're doing for Jordan Love, I'd like to see it. You didn't get a first-round receiver, which is death taxes, and the Packers don't draft a first-round receiver. We expected that, but they were also able to get some weapons for Jordan Love, and I think I think stock is up for him after this draft, seeing what they're doing, and let's all be honest here. If anyone's expecting a rookie tight end to go out there and produce for them year one, that they're really setting themselves up for some failure. The next guy off the board would be Jayden Reed, who also went to the Green Bay Packers. And we've been talking again about Jayden Reed as one of the guys that's really, really been moving up the boards. And he really, Michigan State falling flat on their face this year hurt him a lot. He was a guy that had an extremely good 2021 season and then not a great 2022 season. What are your thoughts about Jayden Reed going to the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good possession guy, I think, for them, right? So they got Christian Watson, who can stretch the field. Now, Jayden Reed can fill that kind of secondary receiver to move the chains a little bit. which is really a lot of what he did in his time at Michigan State. He wasn't this explosive down the field kind of guy or anything like that. So I think it fits the mold of what they may be looking to do, especially when you look at these explosive tight ends that they brought in, right? These tight ends are not going to be guys that they have running drag routes or out routes on, on third down to try to get them a first down. I think that's where Jaden Reed can really eat a little bit and be able to produce some numbers just from a receptions total perspective. But I think the touchdown upside with him is probably going to be capped because he's definitely not going to be the most explosive player by a long shot really anymore at this point for the Green Bay Packers.
And you think Jaden Reed's not going to be an explosive player?
I don't believe so. No, I don't.
Okay. And speed is, one of the big things with him. Romeo Doubs is not really a speed guy. Christian Watson is. And then obviously you have these athletic tight ends, to kind of go away from, having some of these more blocking type of tight ends. Reed's not he's not a bigger receiver, not like Christian Watson is. But a lot of his plays were, either deep down the field or big plays.
Yeah, I mean his ADOT was 11. That's not anything special from a college perspective. His yards after the catch is pretty low. His yards per route run is very low. So I don't see the metrics in. Can he be a deep threat? I mean, sure, anybody could be a deep threat in the right situation, but that's not where I believe he's going to be utilized.
Yeah, I think we're saying two different things. I'm not saying he's going to be a deep threat, getting the ball 30 yards down the field, Marquise Brown. Michigan State's offense also doesn't do that.
Yep.
But I think, as far as explosive player, he's someone that does a lot of the underneath stuff that can take it to the house. And you see it with the bubble screens and you see it with the slants and things like that. And that's one of the reasons he went so high. And very similar to Jonathan Mingo. I mean, Jonathan Mingo is one of the fastest players in this draft. He also had an ADOT of like 2. He was not targeted down the field whatsoever. And part of that's due to the offense, but part of it's just where he played. Speaking of low ADOT, Rashee Rice went to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so what do you think about him? Everyone, dream landing spot for every player is the Kansas City Chiefs. What are your thoughts here with Rashee Rice going here, number 55 overall?
I mean, there was like a 4-game stretch last season where everybody was really excited about Juju, right? He was getting 9, 10, 11 targets over like a 4-game stretch in the middle of the season. And I think that's where you're going to be looking at Rashee Rice. Now, they're different players in their entirety, right? Rashee Rice he is not a speedy guy, but he can create a little bit of separation at the top of his routes. He's got, he can do contested catches, but he's very inconsistent with it. I think that's the role they were looking for out of this draft. When you look at what they've got on that roster currently, they have that speed guy in Sky Moore. They've got that quick twitch player in Kadarius Toney. They still have Travis Kelce. They've got Isaiah Pacheco as kind of that pounding back in between the tackles type of deal. So I think he's a role player in that offense that I think is going to fill in just fine. But I don't know that I want any of these guys on my fantasy team. And that sounds really weird when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, because you should want Patrick Mahomes. The problem is he is not the Patrick Mahomes who is just heavily targeting Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill anymore. He's heavily targeting Travis Kelce, and then he's distributing the ball. And he is a master at that. Right. We saw that transition last year with the lack of weapons. And I think that's going to continue here. And it's just one of those situations where it's like, well, who's it going to be this week? Is it going to be Kadarius Toney? Is it going to be Sky Moore? Is it going to be MVS? Is it going to be Rashee Rice? We don't really know. So I'm tempered, right? Just like I was with Rashee Rice to begin with. I'm not skyrocketing him up boards or anything like that. He's going to stay pretty steady for me.
Yeah, and they've changed their offense quite a bit the last couple of years. Teams adjusted to take the top off, and they had to adjust, and they spread the ball out a lot more. And really, it's Travis Kelce, and then everybody else gets whatever's left over.
Yep.
And they run the ball quite a bit in Kansas City. I think people forget how often they run the ball. They used two running backs, and both running backs were getting quite a few touches. And so just not a lot of, heavily targeted receivers consistently on the Chiefs, minus, of course, Travis Kelce.
Yeah, and in the background, and this is just me from probably the Bears days, letting it cloud my judgment. Like Matt Nagy is calling plays for the Kansas City Chiefs now. So I'm like, oh, man. And I know from a play calling perspective, he was much better than he was as a head coach. It's just that recency bias for me is tempering expectations from just some explosive playmaker on the Kansas City Chiefs outside of Travis Kelce.
Yeah, and I think even, when Bieniemy was there, we saw a lot of the passing game work was still Andy Reid.
Yep.
And as far as the next tight end off the board, it's one of your favorite guys. Luke Schoonmaker goes to the Dallas Cowboys. What are your thoughts there? The Cowboys now have Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb now at Schoonmaker with Peyton Hendershot and the other tight ends.
Yeah, I like it. I really like the landing spot. They know, hey, with Dalton Schultz out of town, we want that guy. Now, you've got three pretty decent, not like these crazy explosive athletes between Hendershot and Schoonmaker, and I'm drawing a blank, and I don't know why.
Me too.
I can't think of who it is. But I do think, Schoonmaker was starting to move up my draft board at the tight end position. The more I watched, the more I read. And this just solidifies my perception of what I think he can be. Again, I don't think he's going to be a Luke Musgrave type of athleticism guy or anything like that. But I do think because of the landing spot in the situation and the athletic ability that he does have, and the fact that he's really not being pushed by a current tight end on that roster, I do think he's a guy that I'm going to be looking at in the late third round, mid to late third round, that I'm okay with.
Yeah, and you saw Daniel Bellinger last year kind of slid into a starting role, and this is something that could happen here with Schoonmaker. And again, temper your expectations for all rookies. I mean, really, the running backs are kind of the only position that takes off year one. A lot of these receivers recently, like I said, they've really spoiled us. But typically, you're going to see moderate production from receivers year one, and tight ends you barely see anything. Don't want to spend too much time, but Brenton Strange got good draft capital. He's kind of a combo tight end. Use him kind of like Kyle Juszczyk, a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, comes out of the backfield, as well as can do a lot of the drag routes and all those things. But fun player out of Penn State. I really liked him. I had him higher than a lot of people, and I was glad to see him go early, but Jacksonville is not the ideal landing spot with Evan Ingram there and potentially working on a long-term deal.
Yeah, I don't have him. It was kind of picked for me.
Yeah, so this one is interesting because one of the things that Russell Wilson really does well, and he really did it well in Seattle, was play action pass. And you need someone on the other side that can be that deep ball, good ball tracking, speed threat. And they got Marvin Mims to match that, to be we'll call it a Tyler Lockett type for that offense. I've never been a KJ Hamler guy, so I didn't see him in that role. And Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, that's just not that. They don't have that really in their bag. Pretty interesting pick here at the end of the second round. What do you think about Marvin Mims going to Seattle or going to Denver?
I like it a lot. I mean, you could see they weren't really happy with Cortland Sutton's performance. You saw Jerry Jeudy start to come on in the back half of the season. They've got that field stretcher at the tight end position and Greg Dulcich. So I think Marvin Mims adds a little bit of a similar skill set, but more speed of a Jerry Jeudy, right? So Marvin Mims is actually a pretty solid route runner from that perspective. Now, he's not a technician like Jerry Jeudy or anything like that, but he does bring speed to the game as well, which is an element that I think they were kind of missing if you really think about it. Jerry Judy's not that speed guy. Cortland Sutton was not that speed guy. He's more that contested catch guy. So it adds a little bit to that offense where, does he fill a Tyler Lockett type of role for Russell Wilson where, very similar size, kind of a similar skill set, Russell Wilson gets pressured, rolls out, and boom, he can hit Marvin Mims down the field on a long touchdown pass because he's got the speed to take the top off of that defense and make plays on the fly. So I really like the landing spot and the opportunity for Marvin Mims. I wish it would have been a little bit earlier, but I'm okay with third round draft capital for them.
Yeah, he was still one of the top receivers taken off the board. There just wasn't
second round draft capital, not third.
Yeah, there just wasn't a lot of receivers that went. We saw more receivers, actually more tight ends than we did running backs through the first 3 rounds, and we saw just as many tight ends and receivers in the first 2 rounds, but a little bit more receivers actually. But as far as Cortland Sutton, do you think there's any chance that the Broncos move on from him this offseason?
No, I don't think so. I think they need that piece. I think he's a piece that they need. They need that true alpha type of size profile to be on the outside. He does have that contested catch capability if he can stay healthy. So I do think it adds something to their offense. Now, I don't think they're going to re-sign him after this season by any shape of the imagination, but it doesn't make sense for me for them to move on to him because if Tim Patrick was healthy all year last year, then maybe. But coming off of his ACL, there's nobody to fill that role right now. So I don't think there's a world where they move away.
Yeah, and that could be the case. Tim Patrick did tear his ACL early enough where he's going to be back for training camp, and it wasn't a week 18 kind of an injury. So he should be recovered and ready to go by training camp. But yeah, I love the Marvin Mims pick. I was a little sad because as a Giants fan, I was just hoping he would fall a little bit further. Let's go to the third round. This day 3 is going pretty fast, and we're seeing a lot of quarterbacks. I did some research, and 10 quarterbacks on average are drafted in the NFL draft for the last 10 years, and this year I was like, we're going to see more, and it's the Brock Purdy effect. Like people they'd rather take a shot on a quarterback instead of just like letting Chase Daniels be your backup for the next 10 years with no upside. Of anything like that, and take a shot on these guys. So, for this round, the first guy off the board was Hendon Hooker. He goes to Detroit Lions. Interesting spot. The draft capital stinks, getting him in the third round. But an interesting spot. Jared Goff he's a free agent in 2 years. Next year or 2 years.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up real quick.
And the Lions,
they can save a lot of money next year, I know.
Yeah, they can save a lot of money. And if they have to have the decision on whether they want to pay Jared Goff that $40 million a year or not, they have Hendon Hooker there. And it really didn't cost them much with that third round pick. It might be one of the picks they got. They got a second and a third round pick for TJ Hawkinson. Might be part of that Hawkinson deal. And you get Hendon Hooker, who's was my number 3 quarterback going into the draft. Some people had him at 3, some people had him at 5. But he goes off as the 5th quarterback. In your Superflex drafts, third round? Going higher?
No, I'd still be okay taking him in the mid to late second. Mainly because I just don't think they're going to pay. Jared Goff is not going to demand the amount of money that I think he wants, right? He's getting paid $30 million this year. He gets $32 million next year. They can save 26. Look, Hendon Hooker, when you look metrically speaking, and the DGen score that we're rolling out, hopefully today, I was hoping it'd get out yesterday during the draft, but it didn't. He came out as the number 1 quarterback from a metric perspective. I'm not saying he is our QB1 or anything like that, but this dude, metrically speaking, is a beast, and he looked good. Now, there is that context around the Tennessee Volunteers offense and how they play and all that, but we really liked him cut through the pre-draft process, liked what we saw on tape. And I think there's a very good chance that he is the starting quarterback for the Detroit Lions going into the 2024 NFL season. So I'm comfortable with that assumption, taking him in the back end of the second.
And talk about you got that offense in Tennessee with some speed. So about Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yep. You
got Jamison Williams.
Amon-Ra. Yep.
And then you got Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, this is it's an interesting situation. If he were to get that position. The next guy off the board was Tank Dell. And just to backtrack a little bit. So our top 5 quarterbacks were Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, 1, 2, and 4. Will Levis was a second-round pick 33, and then Hendon Hooker, 68. In the first 3 rounds, we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 running backs go off the board. Bijan Robinson at 8, Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, Zach Charbonnet at pick 52. They have Kendre Miller went at 74, Tyjae Spears 81. They had Devin Achane at 84, and 88 was Tank Bigsby. Receiver draft capital. Number 1 was JSN at 20. 2 was Quentin Johnston at 21. Jordan Addison at 22. And then Zay Flowers at 23 was your 4th. 5th receiver off the board, Jonathan Mingo. 6th receiver was Jaden Reed. Then you had Rashee Rice at 7. Marvin Mims at 8. Tank Dell at 9. Then Jalen Hyatt at 10. So let's talk about Tank Dell going to Houston Texans. This has been one of the most boring, bland offenses in the NFL for a long time. Now they got C.J. Stroud. They got Tank Dell. You got John Mechie, Dalton Schultz. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like it. I just wonder if you got kind of not clones, but very similar skill sets in that speed guy between Mechie and Dell. So, maybe they're not as comfortable with where Mechie is at in his recovery and his reconditioning and all of that is what they would like. You got Nico Collins playing kind of that bigger X-style receiver. Dalton Schultz with those underneath, kind of contested catch type of routes because he's not creating a bunch of separation or anything like that. He's a chain mover. But what we've seen from CJ Stroud is his ability to throw the long ball and do it very accurately. So, maybe they are just trying to stretch that defense out a little bit to allow Dameon Pierce to be able to run with a little bit less than 8 men in the box every single time he touches the ball. As a running back, but I do like what they're starting to build. I just would have rather seen a different style of wide receiver here with some of the other guys on the board, with Cedric Tillman available, Josh Downs was available, Jalen Hyatt was available. Some of these other wide receivers that we saw go soon after Tank, I would have liked to have seen because of the different profile for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, and you got to remember this is the San Francisco Kyle Shanahan style of offense. There's not going to be a lot of passes deep down the field. There's going to be more crossing routes, more underneath stuff. And, you have John Mechie and Tank Dell.
That's true.
John Mechie's more of a slot receiver, and Tank Dell, he played outside, but his size projects him to move inside a little bit. But you could see him more of a catch and run specialist. And at the Senior Bowl, everyone asked, who's the toughest guy to cover? Tank. I mean, this guy was literally uncoverable to the point where the guy from the Senior Bowl said I had to stop playing Tank Dell highlights because the DB's agents were calling me. And they were like, stop making my guy look bad. And he's like, all right. But Tank Dell was just putting guys on skates. Little Brandon Cooks type of a player goes there to Houston. It was funny because I actually had him mock draft to go to the Niners, but he goes to Houston in that similar system. And they have Nico Collins as well, left him out. So Kendre Miller goes to the Saints. And so big, powerful running back, can run, can catch, good pass blocker. You have Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, now Kendre Miller's there. Do you think that's going to make him a value in your drafts?
I don't know. I think in some it can. But I think most people who are in Dynasty are able to look at things and say, okay, Alvin Kamara most likely is going to be a cut candidate next offseason. Jamal Williams is not a long-term answer. So Kendre Miller might be the guy come next year. And because of that, it may solidify kind of where his range was, right? It was like that early to mid second round pick is what we saw in mock draft. So I think that value is going to hold, I believe, based on the landing spot and the situation with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams.
Yeah, and you're looking at the 4th running back off the board. And so very good draft capital as far as where he got picked. And like one thing I'll say, and I've been preaching draft capital all offseason, there's got to be a sweet spot between rounds 3 and 4, and you have to give the running backs a little bit of grace because of the way the NFL treats them. You literally have the fourth running back off the board in the third round, and that's not really an indictment on them. It's just such a unless you're the Lions or the Falcons, a suppressed position. We saw guys like Breece Hall, who in the 1970s would have been number one overall, going the second round, and in the 1980s, Jonathan Taylor, Mike Ditka would have sold his wife to go get that pick, and he went in the second round. DeAndre Swift went in the second round. I mean, great running backs. Nick Chubb went in the second round, and it's not because they're a second round player or the 50th best player. It's because of the positional value. And
your boy just became a Cleveland Browns. Side note, DTR did.
I saw that, and my boy Clayton Tune went right before him, so I was very happy to see that. So then, and everyone knows I've been a big Tennessee fan this offseason. Jalen Hyatt went to my Giants, and I was pretty excited about the pick, considering I was a little sad we didn't get Marvin Mims. The Giants this offseason said they want to get faster. So what did they do? They added Darren Waller, they added Paris Campbell, and now they added Jalen Hyatt. And they also got a new starting center with John Michael Schmitz. As a Giants fan, I'm happy. For fantasy, I think that Jalen Hyatt is a great fit for what they're looking for. They do have a whole bunch of slot receivers, but this guy offers something a little bit different because of his speed. He is a Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller type of a player. What are your thoughts on Jalen Hyatt going to the Giants? Is he a mid-second round pick for you?
Yeah, I think that's where it stays. And that's kind of where we've seen him go. He trickled down a little bit, right? Early on in the draft cycle, he was more in that late first, and we saw him kind of trickle down a little bit as people got their boards built and all that. And I think that's a pretty solid spot for him, right? The upside that he can give you in that early to mid-second is pretty solid when you think about what the Giants have right now. And none of them are these speedster guys like Jalen Hyatt. Now, I know Paris Campbell profiled as that down the field guy at Ohio State, but since he's been in the league, he's been more that low A-dot, give it to him underneath and try to work some magic there. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Isaiah Hodgins, that bigger, taller receiver. Wan'Dale Robinson, definitely the slot kind of underneath guy. So while you do have guys who ran really fast 40s, on that squad, I don't think they're really comparable from a play style perspective. So I think Hyatt is going to bring that field stretching capability that some of these other players don't necessarily do. So I do like the fit for him. I just don't know that it's going to be consistent enough to be, what we would like to see from a wide receiver.
And I think for me, the biggest winner out of this is Daniel Jones. You look at Daniel Jones as someone that, he's borderline QB1 in dynasty formats. Now with the quarterbacks, maybe he slides out of the top 12, but this puts him solidly in that top 15, top 13 range, where now you have him adding Darren Waller, getting re-signed, and then you have Jalen Hyatt added, and then the offensive line help. So let's continue down the board. Hopefully you have time for this, Brad.
Yep.
Tucker Kraft at 78. I would have liked him to go to a different spot, but I think, one of these tight ends is probably going to work out. Two out of the top 5-6 tight ends on most people's boards go to the Packers. And obviously the Packers trying to address the weapons, address the tight end position. They took 2 bites at the apple. What do you think about Tucker Kraft here? Is he someone that you're going to take a shot on him in the 4th round?
If I've got a 4th round in a rookie draft, yeah, I am. But this is another one of those, like, me as a fantasy football player and not a real NFL GM, I'm looking at him saying, okay, Packers, you idiots, you drafted a tight end early on. You're staring at Josh Downs here, and you go with another tight end? Like, what? Like, the only thing that makes sense is kind of what you were talking about. Like, okay, they just want to run 12 personnel all the time. But if you're going to do that, wouldn't you think one of those guys would be at least somewhat decent at blocking? Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm going to take the value tight end, right? People are going to draft Luke Musgrave early. I'm going to take that Tucker Kraft shot later on, like you said, in the 4th round or as an undrafted rookie free agent in my squad. So just because you don't really know which one's going to come out on top, so I'm going to take the cheaper one. You're muted, bud.
Sorry, we got kids home on Saturdays. And so we got some running backs that went off the board. And so this one I'm a little nervous about. Oh, we skipped Cedric Tillman. I don't want to skip Cedric Tillman. And so Cedric Tillman goes to Tennessee. He's clearly the number 2 option already. What do you think about him going there? I mean,
he went to Cleveland.
Cedric Tillman went to Cleveland. My bad.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so he'll be most likely the number 3, right? And he might just get sprinkled in because if you think about it, Amari Cooper is the guy. They gave up a second for Elijah Moore, who I absolutely love. Donovan Peoples-Jones, that down the field kind of contested catch guy that we've seen over the course of the last couple seasons. I think Cedric Tillman is going to end up being the Amari Cooper replacement next offseason. Amari Cooper will be going into his age 30 season. The contract, well, it's already flipped. They could have saved like $12 million if they moved on, but it didn't make sense, obviously, for them. Now they move into his age 30 season with even more of a delta of money that they can save. So bringing in Cedric Tillman, who, the more and more I looked at the metric system that we built and we watched the tape, he's the best receiver on that Tennessee squad. So coming in and learning behind a route running guy like Amari Cooper, which is where Cedric Tillman could bear to gain a little bit for his game, I think is a really solid landing spot. To me, he's an early to mid second round draft pick. I'm comfortable taking him there. Obviously, if he falls in the late second, I'm gonna snatch him up there, but I do love the landing spot specifically because I'm a Browns fan also. So
yeah, and the Browns essentially got a second round receiver and a third round receiver because they traded pick 42 for Elijah Moore. Yep. And there's no promise that Elijah Moore is the number 2. He's coming off of a good 4 games in his rookie year, and then nothing. And then last year was absolutely nothing. And is it the Jets or is it Elijah Moore? We will find out. But I like the receiver core that the Cleveland Browns have built. You've got Njoku there as a solid tight end option. Amari Cooper, always underrated. And then you got, you also have David Bell there, but Donovan Peoples-Jones gives you that field stretcher. And then you got 2 possession receivers to move the chains and Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore. And I like the fact that Elijah Moore is more of a slot. Cedric Tillman's the outside. And it's not a whole lot of competing with each other. And I had Cedric Tillman as a top 5 guy on my board. So I was super pumped to see both the Tennessee guys go to our teams. And it threw me off there because it said Tennessee next to his name. So the next guy is off the board, and I want to talk about Josh Downs. So Josh Downs went to the he was from North Carolina, and he goes with Anthony Richardson to the Colts and offers them that speed threat they're looking for. Probably moves into the slot with Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman on the outside. What are your thoughts there? At Gardner Minshew could start the entire year, could start half the season. Josh Downs, I think the 8th receiver off the board.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. As good as we saw Alec Pierce play in his rookie season last year, I think Josh Downs is going to immediately be the number 2 target in that offense. He may play out of the slot, but from a volume perspective, I think he's going to be the second guy behind Michael Pittman. He's got a great ability to route run. He's got some twitchiness to him. I think it's a great fit when you look at what the Indianapolis Colts have right now between Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. You got Michael Pittman, that big profile X receiver that can really do anything you ask him to. He can win at all levels of the field. Alec Pierce, I think, is a great third, and Josh Downs working those underneath routes. And especially when you look at what Anthony Richardson is bringing to that team from a rushing perspective, I think that's going to make things even easier for Josh Downs on those underneath routes to really be able to give you some yards after the catch ability. Because those linebackers are going to have to step up on those play action passes or RPOs and things like that. So I really like the choice here. He was very high on my board, and to come off this late, I do question it a little bit with the number of receivers that went ahead of him, but I think the landing spot is premier for him for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people were pretty mad about this one. A lot of but Josh Downs is on the board, but Josh Downs is on the board, and it kept going. And Josh Downs just kind of sat there on everybody's best available list for a long time, and we've all seen that happen. Tyjae Spears, I want to talk about it because some really not so good reports came out. Brad, did you see that regarding his knee?
No, I had an interesting time yesterday evening while the draft was going on, so I missed a little bit of it. I did see a text from you around it, but I haven't seen the
So I,
actual
I
official
can
report
uh,
around
I can read the report, and so this is not good for Tyjae Spears as far as dynasty. And so the report states that and we've talked about it. I brought up during the player profile video the two knee injury, the two ACL injuries. So he has no ACL in his left knee. He's got arthritis in his left knee, and they just have some concerns about him being able to get to have more of a Jay Ajayi type of a career. And it's unfortunate for one of the most exciting players, one of the most fun players. Not only fun, but as a player, but I got to meet the guy. And I told you, Brad, I said, man, I thought this guy was like a stand-up comedian. I mean, everybody just fell in love with this guy. So I hope that it's wrong. There's been outliers in the past. Thurman Thomas basically played his entire career with a partial torn ACL, but they said no ACL in the knee and arthritis for Tyjae Spears. Still gets third round draft capital, which was interesting. Goes behind Derrick Henry. If Derrick Henry somehow gets traded this offseason, then it would be wow. Okay, here we go.
it. Yep,
But
wheels
if
up
he's
kind of
not
deal.
traded, we usually don't see him leave much food on the plate for anybody else. The next guy on the board was
Devon A. Chain.
Devin Achane went to Miami. And so, I mean, you got a blazing fast running back going to one of the track teams. Michael F. Florio said, I would love to see the Miami Dolphins get a 4x1 team out there for the U.S. Olympics. Between Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Achane, that is just absolutely crazy speed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean that whole backfield is built with guys that are just crazy fast, right? Raheem Mostert, super fast guy. If you think about what he did at San Fran, and even in his time with Miami last season, he's a speed guy. And now you add Devin Achane, another speed guy, and Jeff Wilson was a speed guy. And you have, I believe they have all three of those guys currently, right? They still have Wilson under contract. They still have Mostert under contract. And now you add Devin Achane. So a lot of those very similar players there. I'm not saying that he's not going to get opportunity or anything like that, but I do think there's a world where he gets kind of eased in, or maybe it's a running back by committee type situation for them, which we saw some of last year with Wilson and Mostert. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how it fits out or falls out throughout the season. But as great of a landing spot as Miami was, because it's Devin Achane, I don't know that I'd be willing to spend a late first or early second round pick on him. Is that somebody you're looking at in that range?
I've been lower on Achane all offseason just because of the size. I just don't think he's going to get the volume. And even when he was drafted, Dale Jeremiah said this is not a guy that's going to get a whole lot of volume. So, I mean, yeah, if this guy is Chris Johnson, I'm wrong. The hope is that he's going to be able to do that because he is absolutely lightning in a bottle. And I think he's going to fit this offense. But then, if they give him 15, 20 touches a game, is he going to be able to hold up? He is a good running back. And he's not just a good outside running. He's actually a good inside runner. But running in the Big 12 and running in the NFL are not the same thing. I think John,
Big 12, was he?
Oh yeah, Texas
A&M.
Texas A&M is the SEC.
Yeah.
Forgot about that move a few years ago. But with Achane, I think you have you have a guy that goes with a good fit and a good landing spot and gets pretty good draft capital. So you can't take him completely off your board. It's just how high are you willing to go? Are you willing to take him in the first round?
I'm not. No, not right now.
And you willing to take him in the mid second round?
I think probably the mid to late second is where I'd be comfortable with it.
So the next running back is Tank Bigsby, goes to Jacksonville. As an ETN fan, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, right? I think the writing was on the wall that they were going to add somebody to that room. I don't think you want to lean on Travis Etienne 35 times a game. You're going to give him some rushes, but you really want him to be where he's the most explosive, which is that outside run and that pass catching back. And this, I think, is going to allow him to stay healthy for an entire season, which means better fantasy output, to be quite frank, right? So if Tank Bigsby can take some of that rushing between the tackles load off of ETN, and ETN is able to get some of those pass catches on that out of the backfield and still touch them. If he can get, even after this, if he can still manage to get 15 plus touches a game, combination between rushing and receiving, I think that's enough because of how explosive Travis Etienne is. I think it's a great move for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think it really is probably a helpful move for Travis Etienne as well. I know his dynasty value is probably going to drop because everybody's going to say, oh my God, they added Tank Bigsby and he's not ever going to run the ball anymore. I just don't think that's going to be the case, right? We talked about it before. Doug Peterson is a two-back kind of guy. Like, that's what he wants to do. He wasn't really able to do that last year. They moved away from James Robinson. Travis Etienne kind of took the helm. We saw him touch the ball 30 times a couple games, but we just saw him start to break down over the years. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I said that in our group chat in the Kings of Dynasty. And, 15 to 18 touches a game is like, you can be an RB1.
Absolutely.
We saw Ramondre Stevenson do it. And you and I had that conversation. It was kind of like a little bit of a, like in our heads, we want these guys to get every single touch. And, efficiency is going to go down, durability is going to go down, and then availability is going to go even worse.
Yep.
So Darnell Washington went in the third round of the Steelers. Some issues with his knee reported, medical. That's why he dropped in the draft. They weren't very specific like they were with Spears, but getting behind Freiermuth, being more of occasionally going out and catching a few passes, low target, low route participation guy. I mean, Washington's fourth round pick.
Look, so I'm going to use an example that you gave earlier in the show. This is the way that this should be done. If you want to run 12 personnel and the goal is to confuse the defense on what you're going to do, who's going to be the pass catcher, who's going to block, are they both going to block, are they both going to go out? You need guys that provide both of those skill sets, right? So you look at what Green Bay did. They have two dynamic pass catchers that they're going to try to run 12 personnel with. And you look at what the Steelers have. They got Pat Freiermuth. They have Darnell Washington. Two guys, excellent blockers. One guy is excellent down the seam. One guy is pretty good. So now the question is, okay, we can run 12 personnel and run the ball and it be legitimate because I got two tight ends who are good at blocking. Or this could also be a passing down where Darnell Washington goes down the middle of the field. I've got Deontay Johnson underneath. I've got George Pickens going deep. I've got Pat Freiermuth underneath. Like, now I don't really know what's going on. This is how that should be designed, in my opinion. So now, am I going and running to draft Darnell Washington? No. But I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is good for Najee Harris, and I don't know that it necessarily hurts Pat Freiermuth.
So the Packers have Josh Degora, who they took in the second round a few years ago.
Yep.
That's their pass blocker.
Sure.
Their other blocker. Brad's really he's really wanting to fight me on this one. I mean, yeah, they're not going to put Christian Watson as a blocker. I get it. But, this is what you're doing with Washington. And for me, it's arguable whether he is a big receiving option. But I think you add Allen Robinson, you add Pat Freiermuth, and Washington's not going to – he doesn't have a very clear path very, very soon. with Pickens and Deontay Johnson.
Yeah,
To
I mean, he's
fantasy.
off for me. He's off the draft board. Period. I think the need discussion comes up. The fall in the draft comes up. Where he landed comes up. It's a good football draft for me, but from a fantasy perspective, he should not go in the first 3 rounds of your rookie draft.
That was my question. Brad wanted to revisit something we argued about for 15
No,
minutes an
I
hour
just think
ago.
it's good for some other pieces of the Steelers and the Steelers offense as a whole.
You just want to try to drive home another point. And Michael Wilson, another guy that really kind of in the Jonathan Mingo type, has been raising up boards. He's an outside receiver, big receiver, goes to Arizona. Chris Sims had him as his 5th receiver. A lot of people like this guy.
Go to Arizona or Philly?
He went to Arizona. Michael Wilson.
I have him at Philly for whatever reason.
They got a Cardinal under his face.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I must have goofed it up.
Well, Stanford Cardinals, but yes, Arizona Cardinals as well.
Yeah.
Michael Wilson to Arizona, and his injury is just why he fell. But he's a big outside receiver, and on a really bad offense, he was pretty good last year. So I think with DeAndre Hopkins likely out of town, he could offer potential number 2 over there behind Marquise Brown if Hopkins were to get traded. But he's probably the number 3 or 4 to start the season.
Izzy went to the Jets. No. Moving on. Sorry.
The Packers just drafted Sean Clifford. Jake Moody got drafted before a lot of your favorite fantasy football players. Round 4. All right. It's not pulling up for me. There we go.
I can pull it up if you need.
Yeah, if you could pull it up. I'm struggling over here with everybody home and everybody watching Netflix here.
All right. Let me stop my other screen share with what we were going to show. Do this one. Draft tracker. Share. All right. Let me know when you can see it because I can only see the screen now.
Yeah. I can see it. So in the 4th round, we have any offensive players until Rashawn Johnson?
Nope.
So Rashawn Johnson goes to Chicago Bears, big bruising running back. He was, as far as elusive, he was the 2nd most elusive back behind Bijan Robinson. And so, this is an elusive back that goes to a good situation. He can compete with Khalil Herbert, compete with drawing a blank real quick. With Deonta Foreman over there. And the Bears got a very cheap, very solid running back room when you look at it. And Rashawn Johnson, just because he's out here in the 4th round doesn't mean that he could end up taking over this backfield at some point. I think for someone like me who has Khalil Herbert, it definitely will put a little bit of a dent in his value. And you might have to wait and see how these things shake out. Because Rashawn Johnson definitely he's a good enough back and a good enough draft capital to put some fear in, anyone that's trying to trade for Khalil Herbert right now and drives the price down. And I know you didn't have Khalil Herbert high on your board already, but what does this do with Sean Johnson? Is he like the top 5 running back for you?
No, so I still need to see the situation kind of iron itself out. Now, I understand Deonta Foreman's a 1-year deal. Long-term value is not going to be there for him. Khalil Herbert, I believe this is also the last year of his deal. So we could find ourselves in a situation where if the Bears really like what they see from Rashawn Johnson, who, if I look at my metric model, he was a top 5 running back last year and this year from a metric perspective. For the production score. So, when you incorporate in the combine, it kind of knocks him down a little bit. But from a production metrics, the dude looks really good from a yards per touch type of concept. And if the Bears like that and it translates to what they're trying to do, which I think it very well could with Justin Fields at the helm, with the kind of dynamic rushing, passing offense that they're going to be looking to kind of run, he could find himself in a very, very good situation. Now, I think you're going to have somebody in your draft that probably overdrafts Roschon Johnson. I think you could see him go in the back end of the first because of what we're talking about. You could see him go in that 201 to 203 range, early second, because somebody trades to jump up and try to grab him. And I don't know if I'm ready to go quite to that level yet. If you have early rookie drafts, you're going to have to make your call. You're going to have to call your shot. If you don't do your rookie draft until later in the season, let's say July timeframe, now you've got a little bit more data to go off of to say, you know what? Roschon's the guy. All the reports are good. They're saying he's the second guy behind Khalil Herbert. Or hell, maybe he's David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert is the change of pace. So you just don't know how it's going to flesh out. So if you're a later draft, you're probably going to see him start to trickle up just from a normal perspective. But right now, I think you're probably going to have some guys that are taking him a little bit earlier just based on what they hope happens.
Yeah, I think it's it's an interesting one for me, and I've been getting more and more confident with Roschon Johnson being closer to my top 5, and I do like Khalil Herbert, but I'm also a realist, and I see that Khalil Herbert has 7th round draft capital from a GM that is no longer there. And so if they like Roschon Johnson, this could be a path for him. And so I will be moving Roschon Johnson up based off this. And I know that it's going to hurt my Khalil Herbert stock. Darius Davis from TCU goes to the Chargers. I don't see a huge lot of fantasy implications on that. I don't think anyone's moving him too high off the board. We have Stetson Bennett and Jake Haener going off. You got Saints and Rams. And then Charlie Jones gets, slot receiver out there in Purdue. Luckily, he got out of that Iowa offense and was absolutely dominant in Purdue after he escaped Iowa. What are your thoughts here about those picks?
No, I'm not excited about any of those guys.
Sleeper's taking him in the 3rd round. So if we did a sleeper mock draft right now, they're going – Stetson Bennett might be a 2nd round pick.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not interested in any of those guys. I just don't. I think they profile as backup quarterbacks. I know there's some intrigue because of the Saints and Carr and the Rams and Stafford. And, oh, my God, maybe they – no. Get out of here. These guys are not taking the job from Derek Carr or Matthew Stafford. Now, could they start some games because of injury? 100%. But they're not going to be somebody that you're putting in your starting lineup. They're not going to be somebody that anybody buys if they end up having a 1 or 2 game start because of injury. It's just a roster clogger to me. So I'm not interested in either of those guys.
Now, Tyler Scott is interesting. And so Tyler Scott is, again, another one of those speed guys. But going looking at the ADP before, people were getting very interested in him already. And so it's another weapon for Justin Fields. And maybe he's more of a best ball guy than anything. But he definitely offers a different skill set than the other guys they have on the roster. Cole Kmet is, he's an athletic tight end, bless you, but not as athletic as these other guys. DJ Moore plays more underneath, yards after the catch guy. And then you got, Mooney got some speed. Velus Jones got some speed. But Chase Claypool, again, more of a deep ball specialist, contested catch guy. Tyler Scott's got some serious speed.
Yep.
And so he'll add that to that offense. Aiden O'Connell going to the Raiders, future Raiders quarterback right there.
All right, let's get into the 5th. I know they're probably not done with it yet, but
yeah, and we'll get out of here. We'll be doing a mock draft here soon, maybe as soon as Monday. I know there's some people crazy people doing their rookie drafts like tonight.
Yeah.
Clayton Tune went right there in the 5th round. Goes to Arizona. I like that for Clayton Tune being able to go there and back up Kyler Murray, athletic player. If you want to see some highlights, and he's got some good stats. And then DTR, Going to Cleveland, obviously, there's not a clear path for success for either of those guys, Clayton Tune or DTR. But if you talk about guys that, if given the opportunity, could provide some fantasy production, those two guys are there. I mean, talk about Aiden O'Connell and Jake Haener. They don't have the rushing upside that these two have, and Clayton Tune is he's one of the more athletic players as at the quarterback position, very Daniel Jones type. And then DTR, he's got to put on a little bit of weight, but 6'2", 200 pounds, runs a 4.4 40. Just an absolute running back when he gets downfield. Izzy Abanikanda going to the Jets. Ugh.
Pains me.
Breece Hall's coming off an ACL. Michael Carter is there. James Robinson, I believe, is a free agent. Or James Robinson. I don't think James Robinson's still there anymore.
Yeah, he's not. James Robinson is in New England.
So you're looking at basically a handcuff situation, and Izzy Abanikanda is going to go where Sleeper has been telling us all offseason at the end of the third round. We've been mad at Sleeper, and Zach Evans is still on the board.
Yep.
Unless I missed it.
Nope, he is still on the board.
And Sean Tucker is still on the board.
Yep. Well, so Tucker had that heart issue pop up, right? So that fall doesn't necessarily surprise me. Zach Evans definitely does, just because of the explosiveness that he provides. And I feel like I'm probably talking myself into it because I'm a big Abanikanda fan, but you think about the offense that they're running that speed zone that really fits what Izzy can do with his speed. So you hope that he gets a little bit of opportunity, but this year might be the year. It might be an opportunity for you to buy low and sell high, to be honest, right? So Breece Hall coming off of that ACL, the first year return from an ACL is always kind of underwhelming, underperforming. Right. So if you're really a true Breece believer, and I think he's the better back, obviously, I think there's a world where Izzy has some decent production this year because they're easing Breece back into things. And then you use that narrative to sell Izzy before next offseason or before the season starts. So I think there's maybe a little bit of value swing that you can get out of him, but like I said, I'm probably talking myself into drafting him.
For me, it's a handcuff situation, and Zonovan Knight is there. Forgot about him. It's just ugly. That's a messy situation, and that's unfortunate for one of the backs that I was most excited about. But hopefully he overcomes that. I'm not worried about Michael Carter, to be honest, but Zonovan Knight was pretty good, and so he's going to beat both those guys out. Josh Wiley going to Tennessee. Tennessee had a pretty interesting draft. A lot of offensive players. They got, you got Josh Wiley over there. They also, they added a quarterback, a running back, and a tight end. Did they add a receiver as well?
They did not add a receiver. No.
I gave him Cedric Tillman, which I gave him Cedric Tillman would have been like a great pick, but they didn't get him. Sean Clifford. Will Levis's arch nemesis goes to the Packers. Justin Shorter, he was Anthony Richardson's main target in Florida. He goes to Buffalo Bills. He's a big dude. Not a lot of people talk about Shorter, and he's not short. I think he's 6'5" or 6'4". Kayshon Boutte is still on the board as well. A lot of off the field stuff with Boutte, and he's quickly turning into like a Justin Ross. Well, hey, we did it. We made it. So, Brad, any final thoughts on this? We're going to be doing some mock drafts. We're going to be updating the rankings. I have to update my rankings today so I can get them out to everybody. It's been fun, man. We'll argue about the Packers here some more.
Soon. Well, there's just so many neat, like if I look at I've got a sheet where I've been keeping track of like the offensive players and kind of highlighted who I think the needs are and whatnot. And No team that I had marked outside of Philadelphia and Chicago added a running back to a room that I think needed to. Dallas, I know they added Ronald Jones, Tony Pollard coming off an ACL. Like, it's very shocking to me they didn't add one of these running backs. Arizona with James Conner, what are you doing? Cleveland, I thought was an opportunity to add a running back with Nick Chubb aging out, and they got let go of Kareem Hunt. Joe Mixon and the Cincinnati Bengals and all that drama. They lost Samaje
Well,
Perine.
let me run through the next 10 picks on the board that I think we could see a running back. We got the Chargers, could see a running back. I know they got Isaiah Spiller last year. Baltimore, Indy, nah. Green Bay. I mean, Aaron Jones get a little older. AJ Dillon hasn't really been, the dude. They're gonna run a whole lot of 12 personnel with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. You got the Rams. Cam Akers is gonna be on. He's gonna be on his rookie deal. Is gonna be over here soon. We have Cincinnati and Minnesota coming up in the next 10 picks. Kansas City after that. Dallas, 5 picks after that. You could see it. I wouldn't be surprised with this contract situation if the Giants, if somebody were to be available, let's say Zach Evans is sitting there, they could look at him and put him behind Saquon.
Well, that's kind of I look at the Cincinnati Bengals in that situation and say, at this point, you're in the 5th round. How do you pass up on Zach Evans?
Dwayne McBride.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some running backs that are still on the board. And I mean, we see it every year. And, a lot of times we get hopeful about it and draft capital ends up being king.
Yep.
But there are some guys that do slip through, your Chris Carsons of the world, your Austin Ecklers of the world. And, Evan Hull is a guy that's still out there. And so, we're in the 5th round. This isn't the 7th round. We're not talking about these guys going undrafted, but it's definitely not going to, you look, Tyler Algier was a 5th round pick last year.
Yep.
Then Rashad White and Dameon Pierce went in the 4th round. Is that right?
Yep.
So you could see it, but it's harder to see. And the chances go down a couple, percentage points every pick.
Yep.
That they fall down the board. And so we'll have to see. But yeah, there's some interesting running backs that are still on the board. And I'm interested to see
where, like you said, we start at 30 players that we really like, and then it whittles its way down to about 15 to 18, and then you're like, all right, I'm just gonna take a shot at some guys now.
It's every freaking offseason. Like I always remember, like, I just tell everybody, trade up now, and then you can decide if you want to trade back later. But if you wait till the draft, everyone's like, man, I'll trade you pick 27. It's like, I'm no longer interested in it.
Yeah.
So there's still probably, close to 30 players I like, but I would say that, it's more like than love.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And I would definitely be trying to trade 3rd round picks for 2024 seconds and 4th round picks for 2024 thirds, like I always do. And yeah, man, it's been fun, and I hope you have a good rest of the draft.
Oh yeah. Cheers.
All right. As always, good luck this season.